Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. This is going to be a part 2 titled What is Wealth? So following on from my part 1, what are we? Hopefully you will have found out from that video, if you take the hidden message throughout, which I'm trying to introduce, a different type of form in sharing what it is that I think is a way to deal with the pending issues that we have circulating around the world. Because the issue that we face with dealing with what is coming regarding the pending financial implications of a crash to every human being on this planet is going to be significantly devastating, and a lot of people get anxious and upset and argumentative and negative and fearful, but all these things are put in place to trap you. This is really just a case of me sharing my own personal views as I develop as a person in the world that we live upon. Too many people get stuck inside cycles where the invisible shackles are the monetary system. We spend the best part of the first 2 decades of our life being taught what society wants to teach us about how to be a good worker, how to fit into society, why we need to press for higher grades and achievements to attain a higher paying job, to attain a better standard of living. So we have these grand hopes when we're young to succeed and become wealthy and live a good life. But what people forget along the way is that we're here to live life. Now, you're aware the channel is based upon metals and finances and markets and current events, which are all important things for us to live in this society that we find ourselves in this system that has been designed to keep it that way. It's like a board game. You joined a board game when you were born, and there's certain rules and there's certain rewards as you move around. So what I'm learning as I'm moving around this board myself is that you don't actually have to play the game the same way as everybody else. I mean, who would really want to live their life working the majority after their education / indoctrination courses for the first 2 decades, to then follow that up with another 40 to 50 year span inside the workforce, paying huge amounts of taxes, forever chasing higher and higher expectations and wages, normally just to keep up in contention with increasing prices. If that doesn't sound like a tread water scenario and a sinking sand feeling, nothing does. So me personally, I'm trying to find how I can best move through this board game, because unfortunately we all have to play to a certain degree while the current system stands. But that doesn't mean that you can't have elements where you can remove yourself from that game. The first point of removing yourself is to understand it, and to understand the rules within the game. The game is designed to trap you inside of the system. What is the purpose of becoming free from a game if you're so old and ill you can't enjoy life? That's the way society is moving for the newer generations following the previous. Because if you haven't noticed, retirement ages on state pensions are increasing globally. Life expectancy is increasing, but how can you enjoy later life if you struggle to walk, if you struggle to eat? So many people get wrapped up inside their jobs. It affects the family. Mothers and fathers working full-time jobs with overtime. Children being raised by members who aren't even their families. So how can the children in that scenario take lessons if a third-party raiser is raising them, if the state is raising them? It means that the next generations are taking on board what it is that they're being taught by the third-party teachers. So do you see how it all goes into a loop system of misinformation guidance laid out upon governmental curriculum? How many people actually leave school with the skills that they really need in future? How many are taught about money? How many are taught about real applications of debt? For a society to become more efficient in its role, it needs to have a steady supply of workforce. And it's amazing how governmental agencies are forever expanding and creating new agency jobs to cater for the decrease in jobs in society, because the private sector is reducing in size. So to give the impression that economies are growing, money is received from the private taxpayers along with governmental boosts via forms of money creation to pay for these services and to keep this board game continuing. So with a decrease in global private sector and an increase in governmental force, how long does it take before the tax from the private sector is consumed by the public governmental sector? And then the only way these governmental forces are paid is via creation of money. Now that's just a quick glance at what is potentially happening across the sectors. And I want to talk about what is wealth, because a lot of these people that are going through this board game don't actually understand what it is that they are purchasing and investing in as they go through life, because these lessons are not the lessons that are taught at school. So I'll give you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about. So when people leave school and say they have good grades, they basically have a stamp of approval by a governmental force saying that you were a good student, you learned everything and repeated it perfectly to how we told you to say it. So we know that you conform with our guidelines and requests. So we will give you X amount per year. And then there'd be another person, slightly less fortunate, didn't get quite as good grades, has to take a lower paying job because he was deemed uneducated, not intelligent enough to pass the tests. So you get branded with a harder life. But that's fine. So the years tick by and these guys find themselves in a position where, if they're lucky enough, they've saved a bit of money and they're able to put a deposit together to buy a house. So everything goes well, they buy the house and they're ecstatic, and the family celebrates that their young child has now bought their first home, or their middle-aged child, or whatever it is at that specific point in time, because as we know, ages are increasing in purchasing homes. But this is an example. So this guy who's now owning is saying, well, I could have rented, but now at least the the money I'm earning is going towards this mortgage repayment, but I own my home. So here's the first stumbling block that they weren't taught. You don't own shit. You own a liability. A liability costs you money every single month. And if you miss a payment and you don't have any backup payments from parents or friends, then that home will be taken away from you, along with your large deposit that you put down for it. So at the beginning, they were thinking this is an asset, but it's a liability. And you're locked in to that liability. And with the current prices that homes are reaching in the current systems, it's sky high. It's never been higher, ever. And we know that the prices have been artificially inflated for decades now. They may have had small corrections now and again, but the overall trend has been a bubble upon a bubble upon a bubble. And the fear factor that is put upon people is if you don't get in now, you'll never get in. Yet governmental forces are coming out with Help to Buy and many other schemes to aid in the financial purchasing. Now, why is this? Because this has been designed to give people a goal and a target in order to trap them in their lives. Because once you now get into a property scenario, you're in it for 30 to 50 years, subject to your earning capabilities. And if you mess up on that repayment cycle, then everything you have worked for is gone. So effectively, you could have worked 20 years into a system thinking you were paying something off and getting closer to owning title to that asset, which is nothing more than a liability to you, but an asset, bank's books. Because that's right, the bank is the custodian of that loan, which issued that money out of thin air in the first place. So they're trapping you into a system of repayment on free money. If that doesn't sound like a scam, nothing does. That's just one example. And the system decides that one day we're going to hit this market hard, put a lot of people underwater, which is the term for there's more equity in the loan than there is in the house, which makes it impossible for people to sell and lose the loan because they still have outstanding debt on that loan. Now, this has happened through various periods of history, but we are currently in the biggest risk sector ever. So yeah, what is wealth? Is wealth your home? Is wealth the money that you earn coming in from your employment status? Or is wealth something else? So a lot of people will say your health is your wealth, because a monetary system is basically just a figment of imagination. It's a creation of nothing. Once upon a time it used to be backed by something, which is gold and silver, but that has long been gone, and now it just stands for pieces of paper, and not even that, because it's just zeros and ones on a computer screen now. So the objective of these videos that I'm creating now is to not only show people what the system is about, but to now also show them how you can change your existence to be a more fulfilling and rewarding time, only for you and your families, but hopefully for the teaching of your children. Because it all comes down to education, it all comes down to experience, and it all comes down to people sharing. People in society have become so selfish, they don't care about each other. And if you watched my previous video, Bruce Lee had another famous quote. And for those of you who aren't aware, he wasn't just a martial artist, he was actually very intelligent with philosophy and spirituality. So his quote goes like this: If every neighbour helped one neighbour, no one would ever be without help. So how many of us help our neighbours? How many of our neighbours help us? How many of our family members help us? The whole system has now got so tense and so angry and aggressive and negative that you can see it in people's eyes and body language, that they're just conforming with a means to an end. Is that an intelligent civilization? No respect for each other, no pleasantry comments to each other passing by on the streets, the increasing hatred of different races when we all exist on the same planet. The society has lost its grounding, it has lost its purpose, and it has lost its family unity. And I think that is kind of a fundamental part of where people should refocus their energies on the family aspect. But unfortunately, our families just don't have the time. The people don't create time for each other. Yet they spend all day on a screen talking mindless crap about unimportant things. Everybody is glued to that LCD screen, consuming whatever information is fed to them, all the while giving nothing back. Society has become a consumer of energy. So it's why my mentality, although it was very monetary driven, the past few years it's been diverting away from that, because I'm seeing it's not an important factor. Sure, we need it, and it can bring us many great things, but that's only material. People have been disconnected from that spiritual and educational aspect of life. Another example would be, how many people just go for a walk and look at the flowers, the trees, feel the air, the rain, and hear the sounds? These are important aspects that remind us of who we are, to feel connected to the earth, to ground us from the constant bombardment of radio waves, energy waves, Wi-Fi signals, and everything else. How can we increase our wealth? Well, first we need to understand what the wealth is. Do you portray wealth being a 1 and 0 on a computer screen? Do you consider wealth being an ounce of gold or silver in your hand? Or do you consider wealth being the happiness that you hold within your body, your mind and your soul? Or is it a combination of all three? So in today's society, I think we need to try and aim for all three. So you have to be able to split your time and your wealth, i.e. the currency that you have to spend, into each one of these areas. Investment for your future, investment in your time, and investment in your well-being. There's a great saying, there's no point being the richest man in the graveyard. So that's why I've decided to make these videos, to try and give you guys a different perspective on what is actually important in life and how we can actually try to achieve it. Where a lot of the videos that I put out can be very hard hitting because it's real information in a dying system, which is always going to be negative. But the trick that we have to learn is how to take this negative, accept it, and create a positive from it. And that's what I'm going to try and outline in the coming videos. How we can become better in ourselves with the events that are unfolding. Because at the end of the day, this is just a game that is being played to eliminate that feeling of wealth of many people. But if you hold various forms of wealth that can never be taken, then how can they take it from you? If you invest your wealth into some of the areas that I'm going to go into, you no longer partake in the game. So you are free from the implications when it all comes crashing down. There will be many ways that we can protect our financial net worths. There'll be ways that we can protect our health, and there'll be ways that we can protect families around us and our friends. But at some point, you're going to have to remove the one factor that most humans fall into, which suppresses that ability to move forward in life and to remove yourself from the game that traps so many. And the word is greed. If you learn that no amount will ever be enough, and to learn the word content, you can begin to overcome the trap. How much is enough? So it's a case of diversifying what you have equally to those sections to give yourself not only financially but emotionally peace. And when you're at peace, you can feel more relaxed about what's going on, and that's going to be the key in aiding and helping other people. Now, I know how hard it is talking to family members that just have those permanent blinkers and refuse to listen to anything other than the mainstream lies. And that is unfortunately all you can do. You can't push it any further, because if a person isn't willing and isn't responsive to what it is that you're trying to share with them, it just means it's not their time. They're not ready to accept that information. And you have to refrain from talking about it. They will paint you with the brush of being negative. And it is such a tricky subject to talk about, because nobody really wants to talk about it. It's a taboo subject. Nobody wants to think the worst will happen, even if the worst is going to happen. So don't waste your energy and getting emotional and upset about it if it just isn't their time to learn. Something we find apparent is that we find ourselves less connected to those people, and the more we find out, the more isolated we feel, and the more unintelligent we see society. Because how can people not be seeing and understanding what is going on? And unfortunately, a lot of people won't see what is going on until it's the very last second of impact, and then reality will hit them. And at that time, they will ask you questions. So at that point, you need to be ready to share. I'll give you another example of how I have spoken to family members about these topics. And this was some time ago, and we all go through different phases of becoming aware, learning about what's going on, and we have stages of anger, and we have stages of we have to tell people, and we have stages of becoming calm about it because we've made our decisions and our movements with what it is that we have to do. And still these people don't listen or understand it. So those scenarios, we're the ones that will have to carry the burden and prepare on behalf of those we take dearly. So yeah, going back to my example, I asked if they could contribute some money to setting aside some food for a scenario should we not be able to get any, to which this was not received that well at all, and I was basically laughed off. And this is something that we all have to learn to deal with. Yet small things that people can buy now and prepare today are things that you can prepare ahead of time. And I put it in a context of trying to be clever about it, reverting back to history and war times of how our grandparents used to store foods through the wartime because things were scarce, and how they used to preserve foods and stock up for bad times and pick things during the summers so they could have them during the winters, to which this was understood. But were they willing to make a small investment in just putting aside something in case something went wrong? Not a chance. Yet they're more than happy to leave their finances inside of banking systems, investment platforms, which, as we know now, being in the UK, have dropped about 13% this year. So by removing a little bit of that capital, they could have protected themselves a hell of a lot more than what they have done by doing nothing. And that is the problem with people. They do nothing. If they disagree with something in politics, they'll talk about it, but they won't do anything. If they're upset something the council's doing, they'll talk about it, but generally they won't do anything. People don't have the ability to take back control. They like to rely on the security, or lack of, from the government, thinking everything is always going to be fine. And guys, we just know that's not reality. The 90-something% of these people can't see what is happening because the system keeps you so busy and intoxicated within itself that you are drained physically and emotionally by the end of the day. And this is so you don't learn about what's going on. You are just on that hamster wheel all day. And is that a standard of living? Do you think your standard of living has increased throughout the decades? When the family unit used to be just the man going out and working, earning more than enough to support the home, wife, and the children. And these children would be raised by their parents, predominantly the mother, who would raise them, thus taking the beliefs and lessons that the maternal parents want to pass on. The only lessons that are now being passed on are governmental. And who is given the governmental lessons? And that's the worrying question. In order to move forward in this game we're playing, we have to detach ourselves not only from the negative impact of society, but create a positive community, be it through these channels, because we all gain a lot of information and support from one another, which is something that we don't have in our societies because we are so isolated with the views we have because of the percentage of people that understand what's happening. Now it takes, I believe, only 5 or 10% of a population, of a movement, and the rest will follow, because that's what most people are. They need to see actions occurring and movements happening before they then understand and fall in line and support it equally as well. Nobody likes to be the first one, disagrees, but deep down, everybody is disagreeing. And I think we are already at about 5% awakening in the populations in the West. So it's definitely a time when things are shifting, but the biggest impact will definitely be on the financial system. So the real question comes down to, which unfortunately we cannot predict 100% what the outcome is going to be, but we can make precautions based upon likelihood. So this system, over the last multi-decades, has been described as a slow burn, which means people have the impression that they think they're becoming wealthier, while the reality is the opposite. Money has been created out of thin air and inflated the prices of homes, wages, while everything else has risen alongside it as well. Foods, bills, and people get lied to via official governmental releases of year-on-year CPI, consumer price indexes. And it's now been revealed that the likelihood is we're actually on a 7% CPI increase year on year, which means if your income isn't rising by at least 7%, then you're falling more and more into a poverty line. Now, why is this a game that you want to play? Fiat currencies all around the globe are being eroded by the system. Your financial wealth that you hold stored within banking systems, savings, investments gets eroded as time goes by. What sort of sound investment is that? So in my next video, we're going to go into the topics discussing what we can do to improve our chances of becoming overall more wealthy. Thanks for watching.